Let me go to Congressman Reichert. Is the problem, as you see it, the fact that we have an IRS, the fact that we have an Internal Revenue Service that collects the federal income taxes from individuals and corporations, or the problem is that you've got some real bad culture in there where people can look at you right in the eye and say, I'm not prejudiced, I'm not political, but they are. What is the problem?
Well, I was hopeful today to hear some straight answers from Mr. Miller. It didn't happen. So as the viewers watched and as the members of Congress participated in the conversation and the exchange and answering and questions and answers, it became very obvious very quickly that Mr. Miller was not there to take responsibility. In fact, he said, look, I'm not comfortable with the word targeted. That didn't go on. He offered an apology, but then he offered excuses immediately after that. He wouldn't even, in my questioning, acknowledge the fact that certain groups were treated differently. He answered, in fact, he answered no to that question. And then I asked him, is it not your responsibility to provide the information that you knew about this situation to Congress? He would not answer that question. So, Chris, you know, today I think was really a sad day for America as people watch this interview, because it starts with the leadership, and the leadership today in the IRS showed arrogance, showed a lack of concern, and brushed in my opinion, just sort of brushed the issue aside.
Congressman Levin, thank you. You've been around a while. I don't know what I saw, but I certainly saw a disconnect today. That Mr. Miller guy, I don't know what he was. It's like he didn't see what he knew people, certainly right, left, and center, could see, that when you target particular groups, you're targeting particular groups. I mean, if this were on the other foot, and this was a George W. administration, they were targeting groups that were calling themselves progressives, I would say it's prima facie evidence of targeting. I don't think it's complicated. What's your view, Congressman?
My view is that the criteria were very inappropriate. There was terrible mismanagement. I think there was very terrible oversight, and there was a failure to be in touch as they should have been with the Congress. But the IG, the Inspector General, when asked, was there any political motivation for the people who were in the exempt organization in Cincinnati, the lower level people who were working on this? He said no. Was there any outside influence? And he said no. And so when the chairman, and I brought his language, started off his opening remarks saying it's the latest example of a culture of cover-ups in this administration, there was no evidence today to support that. It was politicization of a very, very sad chapter by people who were working and who missed.
Let's take a look at here's Steve Miller. He fell back on a familiar response in Washington. Mistakes were made. But he said any mishandling of cases by the IRS had nothing to do with partisanship. Let's listen.
As acting commissioner, I want to apologize on behalf of the Internal Revenue Service for the mistakes that we made and the poor service we provided. I think that what happened here was that foolish mistakes were made by people trying to be more efficient in their workload selection. The listing described in the report, while intolerable, was a mistake and not an act of partisanship.
Congressman Reichert, I respect everything you're doing here. I'm just questioning some of the thinking by the chairman of the committee, what Mr. Levin mentioned. Is there any evidence on your side of the aisle that there was interference from the White House in the IRS mishandling of these cases?
Well, I think it's important to remember that what we heard in the committee hearing today was that this is an audit, and that the investigation, although Mr. George could not confirm verbally in the hearing that the investigation was continuing, I think that's the impression he left upon all of us in the committee. There is an ongoing investigation. Now, the audit occurred, now the investigation occurred, but you can draw your own conclusion, and so can your viewers, when you listen to the testimony of Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller can't even remember the names of the people who are in his chain of command. He can't even remember who he talked to last, what was the conversation about. Did he talk to anybody in the Secretary of Treasury's office? He can't even remember dates, times, and places. And finally, he couldn't remember when I asked him, who did you talk to about this? Who came up with the criteria? He finally gave me the name. He finally gave me the name. He finally gave me the name, Chris, but he could not remember what she told him. Now look, this isn't somebody reporting. This isn't somebody reporting late to work, Chris. This is a serious issue that addresses civil rights.
Okay, Mr. Levin, is that true? Did they find out who was the one who said, look for patriot groups, calling themselves patriot groups, look for groups that have Tea Party in their names? Do we know who that was now?
I don't think we have all the names. The people who did that were mistaken. It was a serious mistake. But you asked Mr. Reichert a question. Was there any evidence of this hearing to support the statement by Chairman Camp? And again, I read it. It was part of a culture of cover-up in this administration. There was no evidence whatsoever at this hearing. The IG, when asked, said it was not politically motivated, and there was no outside influence, and there was no evidence of corruption. So you asked Mr. Reichert a question. The answer is no, there was no evidence. These were serious, serious mistakes made in the exempt organization people in Cincinnati.
Mr. Levin, when the witness cannot answer the question, cannot even remember who he spoke to.
That's a good point, but what about my point? I agree. We made that point. You made the point that Mr. Miller didn't respond to your very good question. Who came up with the idea of coding these people? My question to you is, in the day of hearings and anything before that in terms of your committee investigations, have you come upon any evidence that the White House was involved?
Look,
the answer to that is no.
I'm asking Mr. Reichert. Mr. Reichert, is it yes or no?
The question was addressed to me, and I think
what's the
that
answer?
Then answer it.
Go ahead, Mr. Reichert.
If I'm allowed to answer it, Mr. Levin, thank you very much. I think Mr. Camp may have information that I don't have, and so that would be a question you could put to Mr. Camp. All the members of the committee have different levels of information that they have access to.
Yeah.
But over the course of this investigation, we will learn the answers to those questions. And the fact that this witness today represents the United States government, our White House, our Secretary of the Treasurer, our IRS, and the fact that he can't remember a thing.
Okay, accept that.
Highly
That's
suggests
a good point.
to me.
But if Mr. Levin, okay, I agree. But if Mr. Levin is correct, and the IG is correct, because he did stipulate this as well, he found this, that there was no evidence of White House influence or Obama campaign influence. If that's correct, is it still appropriate of your chairman to keep saying culture of corruption throughout the government, and this is an example of it, if it had nothing to do with the presidential influence at all?
I don't think that's proven yet.
But if it is that the end of the charge?
Mr. Levin may say that, no, I don't think it is the end of this charge, because we have a duty to find out what happened in the IRS.
Sure you do.
Why?
But can you continue to
people?
Look, okay, here's the question. If you have no evidence right now, this Friday, of any White House involvement, and you don't have any evidence next week and the week after that and the week after that, when do you stop accusing the White House of being corrupt in this regard?
No,
At what point do you say we don't have evidence?
Right.
We can't keep calling them corrupt.
Chris, I'm not accusing the White House of anything. I haven't made that statement at all.
Well, the culture of corruption for this administration, what's that mean?
Well, that's not coming from me. I didn't say that. What I'm saying is, look, I'm an old cop. I want to base what I say on facts. And so today I was looking for facts from Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller did not provide any facts, Chris. Listen to the testimony.
Okay, David, could I just say,
there were no facts, Mr. Levin, that Mr. Miller provided to this country as to why and how this criteria was applied.
Mr. Reichert, you did a good job here. I want Mr. Levin now to take a minute. What do you want done here? I personally want to see the bad apples thrown out of the barrel. And I'm not going to be satisfied. Watch this. As a typical person, if you've got a big problem, there's got to be a big solution. Two people walking isn't enough. The American people are still going to believe if they see the same people there, they've got the same problem there. Only if you, as Charlie Rangel said today, Mr. Rangel said, there's a cancer here, you got to remove it. Do you agree with Mr. Rangel?
I think there has to be action. Look, I was the first Democrat to say that Mr. Miller should be relieved of his responsibilities, and so, Ms. Lerner, I said that a few days ago. I believe absolutely we need to get to the bottom of it. Just don't throw apples at the top if you have no evidence to support it. And in the hearing today, there was no such evidence. We should have a nonpartisan hearing, not look for political points.
Okay, let me agree with, thank you both very much for coming on. Mr. Reichert, please come back again. Mr. Levin, my old friend, thank you, sir, for coming on. I think we made 2 points.